Hello, I'm Anthony Gould, Group Editor-in-Chief of Incisive Media, and I'm delighted to welcome to this live post-magazine webinar to debate a new cross-industry initiative, the Aldermanbury Declaration. Now, launched last week after over 6 months of work by the Insurance Profession Task Force, which represents brokers, underwriters, loss adjusters and claims, the declaration calls on the industry to commit by 2013 to a range of principles and a baseline level of qualifications for staff. But before we start our debate, I just want to draw your attention to the tab in front of you. You should notice to your right 2 key buttons. First one is a questions tab, and that will allow you to email directly through to me questions I can put to our panel. The other one is a voting tab. I'll be running 4 polls during this debate, and I'll open and close them, but please take the time to vote and we'll look at those and discuss them. So, on to today's debate. I'm delighted to welcome to our studios today, first of all, Barry Smith, Chief Executive of Fortis, President of the CII and Chair of the Insurance Profession Task Force. Welcome, Barry.
Hi.
Chris Hanks, General Manager of Allianz. Eric Galbraith, Chief Executive of BIBA. And finally, Amanda Blanc, Deputy Group CEO of Towergate. So perhaps to get us kicked off, the best place to start really was with you, Barry. Surely the industry has been operating for over 100 years. Why did you bother getting the task force together in the first place? What was the problem? What's the driver?
I think I'm not sure it was the driver, but I think it was the collective desire to further understand how we can improve the standards offered to the customer and probably most importantly improve the public perception of what we do. The catalyst was linked, I'm sure, to what happened in the banking sector, but there was a genuine desire to help understand what we could see are better customer outcomes, better delivery through to the customer, how we could improve a lot of what we do. Risk management would be a good example, and probably equally, if not more important, it's the desire to understand how we can attract and retain good quality talent. So those were the key reasons as to why we got together.
Okay, before we move on, I just want to make sure our first poll is live, and the question there should be on your screens now if you're watching, is do you believe the Aldermanbury Declaration will have a very positive impact on the industry, driving real change, will have some impact, will have no impact on the industry, or will have a negative impact on the industry? So I'll leave that open for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll close it and look at the results. So we've talked about why there's a need for action, but what actually is the declaration, just for those that may not have fully read it yet? Perhaps we'll start with you, Chris.
The declaration is a call from all parts of the general insurance industry. I'll start there because that's one of the first times that the London market, the Lloyd's market, the broker market, the insurer market, those dealing with personal insurances, those dealing with commercial insurances, have all come together with a common aim, a common view to commit themselves to a common framework of standards right across the profession. And the declaration sets out the sort of standards and behaviours, the level of ethics that's required right across the industry in behaviours, the level of qualifications, the level of involvement we expect from a number of people. So there's a whole series of things in the declaration that sets out what we expect as a common framework that everyone can sign up to and actually bring their businesses up to a common level.
Okay. I presume a lot of these things would have existed before. It's about pulling them together. What would you say in the declaration is some of the new areas? I think there's nothing new here. There is nothing new. We are a profession that has had good standards. That's had the belief in people being qualified, being fit for purpose, being able to provide trust and confidence to our customers. What's new here is we bring them all together and commit to a common framework. It's been quite disparate. We are, after all, in a marketplace where people can behave differently, can have different business models. All of that is quite acceptable. What I think we need here to do is to bring a common face to the customer so that our customers can recognise what good level of standard is and see it quite easily right through across our profession.
I mean, I totally agree with that, and I think we're really talking here about a renewed focus on professionalism. That's what we want to do, and that's why it's so important now to take up this declaration and look at it, and as a beginning, take it forward and move it forward.
Just to add, if I may, 1 or 2 comments. support what's been said. I think the impact of this will be different in different organisations. So I'm sure that in principle the underlying messages will be being delivered within most, if not all, of the organisations. But I think what we're looking for here is clear direction on how we can improve the standards. How we can improve the standards by, as an example, more education, more knowledge, more training, and out of that provide what we hope will be better solutions for customers. So I think it is increased focus on and drawing comparisons with other professions on what we can do to raise overall the standards of delivery through to the customer.
I think just also to make the point that it's also about attracting great people into the profession, because too often you see talented people attracted to the solicitors, to be solicitors and accountants, and what we want is for talented people to come into the insurance profession and be recognised as having proper qualifications, that they can see a proper career plan that they can progress through as you would do in any other profession, which has, I think, been missing.
A key word in what we're trying to do is which resonates very strongly with the customer, is chartered. So in terms of all the research that we've looked at, and it applies to insurance when you look at chartered insurance brokers today, but also if you look at the research from the customer, the level of trust and confidence they have whether it's a chartered accountant or chartered surveyor or whatever. So there is genuinely a desire over time to understand how we can raise those standards and, more importantly, out of that increase the trust and the perception of quality from the customer. And to differentiate between what we see as chartered insurers and chartered insurance brokers.
I mean, I can understand the benefit, especially on the commercial lines and the commercial broking side for the chartered status. But I mean, what about personal lines? What is a company like QuickFit? What's it for them when they're already doing their own stuff?
I feel very strongly about that. I mean, I don't think you can actually sit and say that because you're dealing in personal lines, you don't need to be professional. It's a different view about what professionalism is, and I think it's really important to act professionally in everything that we do in relation to our sector. And I know, for example, you mentioned QuickFit. That's one of our members. It's a very professional organisation. Take training and competence very seriously. And I think that's an important element of how their success and how they do the business.
I don't think there's anything in the declaration that isn't as applicable to commercial lines as it is to personal lines. Training and development, ethical conduct, having qualifications, continuing professional development. It's all the same stuff. It may apply differently, but I think that's a little bit of a red herring to say that it only applies to commercial. I mean, that's absolutely not the case. I agree with Eric.
No, I think our customers have a right to expect that the people they deal with, wherever in the insurance industry, are people who are competent, that are trained and can give advice in which they can have confidence and trust. And that's, I think, at the very heart of what we're trying to achieve here.
Okay, I'll probably touch on that again in a second. I've just closed our first poll. I'll give you the results. The question was, do you believe the Aldermanbury Declaration will have A? 25% say it's a very positive impact on the industry, driving real change, which is quite promising. 70% will have some impact, which I think is we'll wait and see. I mean, it is early days. It was only launched last week, so I think that's probably fair enough. And nobody said it would have a negative impact, and 5% will have no impact. So, I mean, that's very positive news.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's right. I had a meeting with some of our members today, and we talked about this, and I think the principle is there, and they believe in the principle, and it's what they're talking about is how we put that principle in, turn it into reality. And I think that came across strongly from the membership there. It really is.
But I think that's a really good starting point, because we've been talking about it for a long time, so I guess we've already made the leap. We can't expect everybody else to have made the same leap within 5 days. So, the fact that people are saying, 25% of people are saying it's going to be positive and 70% are saying it's going to have an impact, I think that's really good news.
Yeah, no, they're very positive results. Our second poll I'll make live now, and this relates to sort of a fairly solid part of the declaration, is the onus on qualifications within the declaration a very positive step, it will make no difference, a backward step, a very backward step. So there's a fair number of choices there. That's now live for viewers out there, so please take the time to vote. I'll close in about 5 or 10 minutes. Which brings us neatly onto the area of qualifications. If one of you would like to just recap on what it's saying about qualifications, about the level, something like half a certain number of staff.
As a general opening comment, I mean, there's a central theme which is to do with training and development for all. And then over and above that, we've said in the, if you like, the specialisms, in the specialist areas, and this applies to a large extent to the insurers or the brokers, and we've said in the specific insurance disciplines, underwriting and claims, then there are standards, 50% of those people or 50% of the management team to be qualified to ACII. And I think the sentiment behind that is to, on the one hand, and picking up what Amanda said earlier, create a framework, Chris's earlier phrase, where we are committing to training and education, but we're also saying let's have some understanding of what's appropriate, what's relevant, and out of that, how it can help people build relevant skills to help further promote their own positions and employment options for themselves. So I think what we've tried to do is create, if you like, an overall statement of commitment to training and development, but at the same time recognise there are some specific insurance disciplines, and we should be raising the bars in those areas to ensure that we're building more knowledge, more skill, and out of that clearly differentiate the quality of service that we can identify from a customer need and deliver to.
Okay, I mean, obviously, some cynics have already said, oh, this is just a sort of sales program for the CII. I expect I know what the answer will be to that one, so I'll ask anyway. And perhaps, Chris, do you want to take that one?
No, it clearly is not a sales pitch for the CII. What it is an absolute strong belief amongst the senior people in our industry that something needs to be done to restore public confidence and reassert the values of professionalism. One of the fantastic attributes we have in our industry is such a diverse population and a diverse range of jobs. That's one of the reasons why we've gone for 50% of management teams in underwriting need to be qualified to ACI, because you have so many other roles and tasks that can be done without the necessity of ACI qualification. But we're saying in here that 90% of customer-facing staff should be part of the CI. And the reason for that is a CI has a code of ethics, has a standards of behaviour, has a governance regime, it has standards that people can see and identify with, and becomes easy for us to implement and police. So I think it's much more about there has to be a framework, there has to be something concrete around this, and the CI is the most appropriate body as the professional institute for insurance.
In any other profession, this just wouldn't be questioned. In any other profession, you know, it is automatic that you are part of the professional body, that you sit the exams that are relevant to the role that you're doing. And I think, you know, it's a shame that we're even questioning that it's a sales tool. I think it's absolutely not. I agree with
It's
you.
a minimum standard, a minimum starting point.
And inevitably people will have different views on these things. What became very clear early on was the genuine consensus and commitment to take action. And in terms of, you know, the response to the questions is just a revenue generator. Let's not lose sight of why the CII is there, which is, in overall terms, to improve the standing and the image of our industry. And it is a not-for-profit making organisation, which does mean that any monies coming in will continue to be invested in order to further accelerate what is important to create that overall impression in the eye of the customer. But as I said, a lot of people react differently. I'm incredibly encouraged by the first poll, probably pleasantly surprised. But I do think that what we are trying to do again is create a genuine course of action, bold actions to be taken so that we can further improve people's understanding of insurance and delivery by way of improving the customer outcomes.
Okay, before I close the next poll, I just want to ask one quick question again. The ACII keeps being mentioned. I suppose the obvious question is that fit for purpose?
Well, I'll kick off. What's important is to ensure that qualifications are relevant, appropriate, and out of that attractive to individuals. And I say qualifications. There are many roles within insurance where other professional qualifications are needed and totally relevant to businesses. When we look at the ACII, we are going through, and there's been a tremendous amount of good work done on this, we're going through a process to understand how we can have different levels of qualifications for people, building modules that make sense, that are relevant. It may be that there are some common modules for everyone, but if you're an aviation underwriter, you want to build some specialisms. So what we're trying to do is further develop, and there's good work underway already, what we see is relevant and appropriate, and out of that people will demand those training and qualifications, because they will see it puts them to an advantage in relation to not just their skills but their employability. So I think that we have got to stay in touch with what the members of the CII see is appropriate. There is some good work underway, and I'm sure people will see again that there's even more relevance to their own specific requirements.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to that issue with our third poll, which is asking a very similar question. I've just closed our second poll, and it was, is the onus on qualifications within the declaration? And the answer is 50% say it's a very positive step, 45% say a positive step. So perhaps we're preaching to the converted today, but they're quite large numbers. Only about 4% say it will make no difference. So again, that's a big thumbs up to what you're doing and answers that question. I'm just going to start our third poll. I just want to make sure we get through all our polls today. And it's, are the existing qualifications offered by the various insurance-focused professional bodies, so it's not just the ACII, it's not just the CII, it's also CIRA being on the panel. Are they very relevant, need updating but they're okay, or out of date? And that's now live, so please, if you're watching out there, please take the time to vote and think about it as the whole package, really. So going back to that issue of qualification, so I went to that. I'm going to go to, sorry, the questions are flying in at the moment. In the absence of any compulsion behind this recommendation, the deadline I believe is set for about 2013 for the majority of institutes signed up, do we, as in you, the panel, really think any changes will be made?
I do think that they will be made because I think that there will be a real wave of activity which will start now as firms sign up, and it will become an advantage to firms because to customers, because it produces a better customer outcome, and to attracting individuals. So a chartered firm, I have absolutely no doubt, will be more attractive to customers and to individuals who want to come and work there. So there may not be a compulsion in the sense that, you know, if you don't do this you won't be able to trade, but the fact is it will become a competitive advantage to attracting and retaining people and dealing with customers, which will make, I think will create a real momentum and a tipping point at some point between now and 2013, and hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later as firms start to sign up. And you know, the firms that are watching this, you know, I'd strongly urge them to start signing up straight away so that we can start to create that momentum, because clearly people are supportive.
Yes, yeah, and I would say it raises another issue about the whole idea of whether or not to do as a sector to do something, we need compulsion. We ought, as a sector, take on board issues and drive these things forward. I think they will also have regulatory benefits for us to deal with these ourselves. Why should we wait and have something to be compulsory put on top of us?
Absolutely agree. And I think there's going to be another driver, is that when those organisations get back closer to professional roots, to understanding that this is an insurance business and the mechanics of insurance are about trust and confidence and understanding the technicalities of the business, the organisations that have more people that are professionally qualified, more people involved in training and development, their results will start to separate from those organisations that are not investing in that time and energy. And all of a sudden you'll start to see that peer group coming through. The shareholders start saying, well, why are your results inferior? Why are you not able to grow? And I think that will force some of the other insurers who are outside of the family to come within. I think this is a huge peer group pressure.
It may be worth just adding one comment as to why it's 2013. It was a conversation we had together as we were shaping up the proposals, because our first response is that seems a long way away. Yeah? But part of the reason why it's 2013 is there is, if you like, a natural process in relation to undertaking the examinations, and it will take a certain period of time. And therefore what we're saying is, if those are the standards that we see need to be adopted, and in particular to get the chartered status, whether that's insurer or broker, then we must respect the fact that some firms could invest even more today, but they won't necessarily achieve those standards until, because of the time it takes to pass the qualifications, 2 or 3 years out. So that's where the 2013 came from. So it was a pragmatic way of deliberately aligning the timescales to the objectives to enable companies to be able to achieve what they're setting out to do as per the standards outlined.
Can I look at the other side of compulsion, really, and that's teeth? What teeth are there, or plans are in place to make sure that once you've signed up and you've become chartered or you're assigned there, how do you enforce it? And that relates to a question, or an observation really, I think from Reg Brown, which is, would the panel agree with me that bearing in mind the raft of mis-selling claims in recent years, from pensions, endowment mortgages to today's news on PPI, that standards have not been high enough, and it is plain that something needs to be done?
Well, I think there already are some guidelines in relation to chartered insurance broker, and there's an ongoing need for people to maintain those standards. So I think there is a requirement and an obligation for us to understand how we, and Chris used the word police before, and some people may think that's a bit strong, but it perhaps isn't too strong, because it says if you have a standard, and if we're setting ourselves out to be seen as a profession in the way in which people see other professions, then you'll know accountants are struck off, you'll know surveyors are struck off, and we've got to find a way of making sure that not only are we seeking to achieve these standards, but people need to maintain them. And if they don't, they will not be able to use the chartered status.
Reg also raises another issue here, which is really quite interesting in relation to mentioning where these issues have come from, and really looking at the challenge that we have about where these types of policies are being sold in secondary markets. So that's another challenge that we need to address within this whole perspective of the declaration.
Okay, just another question through, which is something I thought might come up, basically about grandfathering rights. Please advise if there will be allowances made for people who have worked at a certain level for many years but do not have qualifications. That's from David Hoskin. Would be some sort of grandfathering.
We'd probably turn it round a bit, and that's not ducking or hedging. It says that we've stated very clearly where we see the standards. And the standards are 50% in a variety of different metrics that we're measuring in terms of management board and specific disciplines. So I think that in itself helps create the way in which people can be part of an organisation that could still be qualified as a chartered insurer or chartered insurance broker. Because by definition there's slightly more than 50% who are not ACI qualified. So I think in a way it deals with the grandfathering head on. It says what we're looking to do is build a level of qualification and understanding professionally recognised by ACII. But it still gives companies, as we progress through this evolution, companies to have the flexibility to still recruit and retain, I hasten to add, good quality people.
Okay. I'm just going to close our third poll, just like to move on. And the poll was, are the existing qualifications offered by the various insurance-focused professional bodies? And I'll give you the answers. And it was 42% relevant, 35% need updating, but they're okay, 1% out of date, 21% very relevant. So I think that echoes what you're saying about particularly the ACII needing to be reviewed and sort of given a sort of a once-over.
But it is currently being reviewed. There's a big GI evolution programme which is reviewing all of the exams, and there's a huge piece of work going on currently by the CII to do that, and they're just about to launch, I think, the first new syllabus, which is very modern, very interactive in the way that it's taught, and that the materials are very, very up to date. So that is already happening. It's a huge piece of work, and you can imagine how difficult rewriting all of the exams and all the material is, because as soon as you write it, it's almost immediately out of date.
So last poll I'm going to make live, and I'll leave this one live until the end of just near the end of the programme, so I want people to think about it really. If the charter was applied by December 2013 across the majority of the general insurance industry, will it result in a more attractive and professional industry, result in a more qualified and professional industry? And there's quite a subtle difference there between those answers, which is why I want to leave this as open longer. Have no real impact, or result in a negative impact on entrepreneurship. And the reason I asked that last question really relates to something I've picked up from some brokers I've spoken to over the last 18 months really, and it's broking particularly as a broad church. It's some do not want to be seen particularly as a profession or as professionals. They want to be seen more as salesmen, ducking and diving, making a good deal, more like an entrepreneur. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that.
Well, I think it's a bit, I would object to the fact that you could say that entrepreneurs duck and dive and are not professional. So I think you can be an entrepreneur and still be professional. And I think that, I think gone are the days where you can just be a great salesman. You have to have proper professional people backing you up, supporting you, making sure that, that you are providing the customer with with proper documentation, proper advice. And, you know, I just can't imagine that there is a broker in the UK that does not want to be referred to as professional. And I think if they do, that's exceptionally sad.
Very weak excuse.
I think there's a distinction. There's a distinct. I agree with what's been said, and there's a distinction in my mind in terms of the competencies that we're seeking to further expand and deliver in relation to the Aldermanbury Declaration. And therefore, what we're saying is we are looking to understand how we can have a deeper level of knowledge on insurance. I think that should be clearly separated from how people have their own individual styles and how they want to, if you like, relate to different customers. So I think it in no way is trying to, if you like, standardize the way people go about things. But it is saying that your inner knowledge of what insurance is, your inner knowledge of things like risk management practices are central to being able to, one, identify the real customer need, and secondly, be able to tailor solutions. How you go about spivving the answers and dealing with those individual customers is individual choice linked to those clients and what hopefully relates to those clients. But I think that's as far as we should go on it. I think I wholly endorse what Amanda and Erica said in terms of please understand we should be and people will be looking to be professional in what they do.
By the way, that doesn't mean to say that a broker cannot be good at sales or that sales is not an important part of what any organisation does. Sales is not a dirty word, but it has to be done in a professional way. Otherwise, you know, that's not right for the customer.
Actually, just to build, sorry, Eric, apologies.
No, I was just agreeing.
If you take, and Amanda's helped us a lot in terms of just again pointing us to one of the key parts of the question, which is to do with sales skills. And if you look at today's market, and if you look at in particular the commercial market, probably out of the last 12, 18 months, there's been a greater degree of focus on the need to build sales skills competency. You know, the rebroking aspects, the dual pricing, etc. So there's no doubt at all, it's probably what Amanda said, the requirement to understand how you can further promote your ideas and influence the customer, hence the sales skills, is critical. But that should be under the umbrella of knowing the products and positioning and risk management processes that are important.
I've got a flurry of questions through, so I'll try and get through some of these. Some will be more observations than questions. The one that's been prioritised here is, okay, 50% is fine, I think we know what that relates to, but customers will demand 100% qualified. You must envisage by when this is an aim at least. Surely insurance industry has to bite the bullet and take this step, albeit 50% is a good first step. So I suppose in a nutshell they're saying is 50% the final mark or just the baseline where you want to start?
I think the sentiment of the group is that what we want is to set an ambitious but realistic target, which clearly differentiates between chartered status and people that aren't able to command that title. And that resonates, as we've said, with the customer. It is highly possible, again, as we move through the next few years, that is in any business, in any activity of life, people say, how do we further improve what we're doing? We haven't at all ever discussed 100% by a certain time, or 100% or higher standard by a certain time. What we want to do is move us in the right direction, and naturally I think the industry in its response to the customer need will say, what do we now need to do? And that will no doubt evolve further as we move through after 2013.
I'll move on to another question. I'd like to get through as many of these as possible. I agree that this is from Roy Blackburn, it says, I agree that different relevant qualifications is valid to achieve demonstrable skills within the industry, but is there not a risk that a variety of letters after your name will cause confusion amongst customers with ACII meaning no more or less to the buying public than cert of insurance or similar, resulting in a conflict with the aim of establishing clear competence amongst buyers? Yes or no? No.
Okay. As I said to begin with, I think qualifications are a minimum standard. I think when I came into the sector, it was actually said to you, you've got to get your qualifications, or you're really out the door. You're not going to get anywhere on that basis. I don't see it being confusing. I see it as a starting point, as where we then take it forward. It is not a badge of experience. You know, you will build that experience up as you go along. So I wouldn't necessarily agree that there's going to be confusion on it. And hopefully, if there is any sort of confusion, then it's up to us to make sure that we clarify it to the consumer.
And the one clear differentiator is the chartered insurer, the chartered insurance broker. These are the real clear differentiator. And in the declaration and the rules we're putting in place, you'll see there's always, if the client wants to speak to a chartered insurer, they can get access to us. And those who sign up to the declaration have to provide access for the customer to the chartered insurer or the chartered insurance broker.
If I may, it's a good question though, because unintended consequences from the actions that we're taking. So it may be we've got to reflect that isn't a comment on having CERT or ACI or FCII, but it may be something we've got to focus on more. Chris is right that the umbrella and the key impact phrase is definitely chartered. But we may need to think through some of these things to make sure that we are creating more clarity and understanding and not making it more difficult or misleading for the customer. That is not the intended position for us to achieve. So there are some aspects, and this may be one of them, where we just need to think it through and say, how do we position this and help the customer? Having said that, if you take the accountancy profession, there are a range of accountancy qualifications. So, you know, there may be some parallels where we've just got to look at, well, what does the customer think about different, you know, accountancy qualifications? Does that impact in them in any way?
Okay. Another question was from Mina Gill. Again, it's an observation as much as a question. The insurance industry is still failing to attract new people into employment. School leavers, graduates, etc. do not think about entering into a career in insurance, given that the insurance industry has such a diversity of roles. How will or can the Aldermanbury Declaration be used to attract new people and to promote positives of the insurance industry?
I think that just a couple of things about that question. Firstly, we shouldn't call it the insurance industry; it's the insurance profession. And you know, I think that is a habit that we all need to get out of, and that in itself will make people want to become part of the profession. But this absolutely will attract people because it will give them a clear, a clear set of qualifications, that we're serious about training, development, about customer service, and that, you know, this is a proper profession. The diversity aspect isn't something that detracts people. That is what attracts people into the insurance profession, because there is a range of things that when you come in, you can move between claims, underwriting, actuarial. There's so many sales, there's so many different things that can be done. I think that's a way of attracting people. And what we've failed spectacularly to do is to get that point across to graduates and school leavers that there is a diversity within the profession, that they could come in, they don't have to stick to doing broking, they can move into underwriting, and we need to do more of that. And I think this will really, really help, because it makes it look more professional, and at the moment it just doesn't look that way.
Sorry, Chris, after you.
This is about our biggest challenge, because Amanda's quite right. When we get into the industry, to the profession, we see the diversity, we see the fun, we see the good earnings, we see all the potential. Most of us don't leave when you get in there. Just that most of us fell into it by accident. And we have to change that and that is going to be a long, hard road. We need to get into our schools, into our universities. The CII have got a very good program, but it actually is for all of us.
Yeah,
we often talk down our own profession. We talk down our roles, actually, instead of being inspiring about the great careers and opportunities that are on offer. So it's something that all of us need to embrace. And I think the declaration is a focal point. It's a bit of a standard in the ground for us to actually use and point to as something that is changing in this profession.
I've just had a couple of comments. One is that inevitably with what we're talking about here, it sets out what we're trying to achieve overall. The question itself probably helps us understand that there's a need for us to communicate even more what more we're doing. So if you take the schools programme, over 1,500 schools have been visited over the last 12 months to help them understand what insurance is. The Discover Risk programme on the internet, which is principally linked as well to social networks, are good examples where the CII is taking action to understand how we can positively improve on the image of the insurance sector. But out of that as well, there's a need for us genuinely to help people build their skills, see they're more employable, and enjoy what they are doing, and hence the reason why we're looking for the commitment for training and development. We know that it's not just new people coming in, it's to create the framework for training and career progression with people that are already in the industry. Stroke profession.
Yes, we have to be careful. A question here from Nick Crocker, which I think raises some very good points. It basically says, great to see the initiative, albeit this has been a long time coming. Having been a qualified ACII for 36 years and throughout a 40-year career span, as an insurer, broker, consolidator and underwriter, only one customer has ever asked me about my organisation's professional capability and skill and development. What do the panel believe needs to be done to get this message across to the customer, both commercial and personal?
I think it's a very good question. It's an opportunity for each, certainly in the broker sector, which I'm involved in, to make sure that this will become part of what they represent, being a profession, being a chartered broker. It will raise awareness to the consumer about who they're speaking to and what that broker can offer to the consumer. So I think it could take some time, but I think it's and again it's back to the starting point, and we do need to take that on board when we're putting this out to the rest of the world.
I do think customers' expectations are increasing, though, aren't they? And there will, you know, as time has evolved, I'm sure that Nick, in his very long career and successful career, you know, you won't have got asked so much 36 years ago. I think now, though, there is an expectation that people are qualified, the people that you deal with, in particular in financial services, and in particular in bearing in mind what's happened over the last few years. I believe that there will be more people asking, well, are you qualified? What are your qualifications? What does that mean?
Yeah. There may be something that, in terms of the package, again, that we need to look at in terms of how we promote chartered status and how out of that we increase the level of awareness. To some extent, it will be, I think, in due course, a natural process where customers will be seen to get better treatment, better understanding, higher satisfaction from those people who are qualified, or companies that have got the chartered status. So I think that goes back in part to one of the earlier questions.
I've just closed our final poll. I just thought I'd share the results with you. The question was, if the charter was applied by December 2013 across the majority of the general insurance market, will it? And the majority of answers were 72%. It will result in a more qualified and professional industry. 22% said it will result in a more attractive and professional industry. And again, the difference there is what we're talking about, making the industry attractive. About 5% say it will have no real impact, and nobody's bothered to say that it will have a negative impact on entrepreneurship. So that's, again, that's all very positive.
That's great.
I mean, I'm going to look through these again in a sec, but one of the things that I think was raised slightly earlier, again, it's about the charter position and the regulatory position. Has there been any conversations with the FSA in particular about their plans for perhaps some compulsory sort of qualifications, as they've done in other parts of the industry, especially under pressure from the government to do something, even though the insurance wasn't really part of the financial crisis?
The honest answer is I'm not sure. What I would say is, one, there is regular dialogue with the FSA, as you'd expect. Moving from general insurance, which I'll return to in a second, if you look at the influence that the CI had on the outcomes for the RDR, the Retail Distribution Review, there's a lot of alignment between the CI's views and what needed to be the outcomes in the RDR. But part of the motivation for the general insurance action that we're saying is that let's do it ourselves. Let's take action ourselves. Let's not leave the door open for somebody to take action or tell us what to do. So I think the motivation is from within. I think the FSA we all recognise as a key stakeholder. We need to make sure we stay in tune with them, if they're in place, if the Conservative governments, whoever wins the election coming up. So all it says is there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and all we're giving is an illustration that there could be uncertainty with the FSA or whatever. There is not uncertainty with us. What we think is there's a lot of certainty, a lot of concrete action that could be taken to help ourselves establish what we want to achieve, which has been seen as a professional industry. Can I say that, Amanda? Yeah. And out of that, genuinely deliver to real customer needs.
As far as I know, Sandy has in fact been in touch with the FSA and kept them advised of the process. I think we now need to take a wider position, and certainly from BIBA's point of view, we will be engaging with the FSA as to how they see it as well. But I wouldn't stand in anything that Sandy's been doing. But I do think there's got to be a regulatory feedback on this and input to make sure that we engage with them.
Agreed.
And get the benefit.
Agreed.
There's a question here from John Hettle. How do the panel believe that our customer, the insured, will benefit from this initiative, particularly in relation to claim settlements?
I mean, if you were a customer and you just had a claim which has possibly disrupted your business and putting your business at risk, or your home or your car, would you rather have a a qualified person dealing with it or a non-qualified person dealing with it. I would have just thought it's obvious that you've got somebody who's been trained, developed and qualified to handle your claim.
In part, we can talk about claims in general, but we know what really counts, and that is that how is an individual dealt with? And therefore, what's the experience they've got? And the experience they've got, positive or negative, will influence what they wish to do in the future. What we see here is that by investing in the knowledge, the skills, the training, the development that we think is important, with that knowledge, then we should have, as a sector overall, as a profession overall, a higher level of satisfied customers. But it will depend on different companies. It will depend on the degree with which they invest in capability, and that means skills, competencies and processes. So there will still be differences of delivery in terms of claims. But overall, what we're saying is we think this is a package of works which will increase, with very strong probability, the level of standards through to the customer.
Yeah, sort of picking up on that, there's a cynical comment here from Simeon Chapman. Says, can't charter status just be bought, albeit that there needs to be a percentage of those qualified on the board? Is it then a question of membership and a percentage of staff as members? In which case, what value? I've taken the question away. Where has it gone? Sorry. In which case, value does this add? What value does this add to staff, or how does this bring confidence to the customer? So it wasn't that clear, the question. It seemed it when I was reading it out. We're basically saying, is it just a numbers game?
It is very easy to be cynical about things like this, but the whole purpose that a number of responsible organisations, the leaders across our industry, are going to sign up to a declaration that says we are going to implement a framework of raising professional standards, by its very nature is us doing something different. Us actually promoting active standards, looking at ways for people, if they are not living up to those standards, there has got to be, a much better understanding of where people are falling down in the areas where we expect to see an improvement.
And it will have teeth, according to the point about whether or not you retain your charter status.
We're down to our last few minutes. I just want to read this one. You'll like this one. It's less cynical. I applaud the approach as an ACI qualified professional, but this will only work if the declaration is embraced by the major industry players. What does the CI intend to do to A, ensure there are only big name large employer supporters, there are early big name large employer supporters, B, ensure this doesn't slip off the radar over the next couple of years or months, that's the cynical bit, or C, convince the firms that don't engage that they will be left behind in the search for professional staff. And I think that'll be our last official questions.
Allianz is the world's largest P&C insurer. We are early adopters of this declaration. We will be chasing, for the division I run, which is commercial, a very early adoption. Not only because I think it's good practice, it aligns very nicely with our business. I believe it'll give us a competitive advantage. It's also the right thing to do.
Okay. Towergate is the largest independent broker in the UK, and we will be signing up for the declaration.
I think the question, though, wonderful to see the support that's there. The question also raises the issue over momentum, and therefore we've got to make sure that there is a course of action that's taken, and that we promote those actions and we communicate what is being done, which comes back to make sure it doesn't drop off within the years or months. So I think we've set a course of action, we've set the direction. As with any desire to change, there needs to be a way of implementing that, a way of communicating progress that's been made, and out of that gaining even more support, so that we can, with confidence, hit the 2013 standards.
It's on BIBA's agenda. I won't let it drop off the agenda. I will be discussing it with my members. I will be dealing with any issues that come up around questions with Sandy and the CII generally, and we will be working with the CII to drive this forward.
Okay, and finally, just to round off, I was economical with the truth. It isn't the last question. One message, just going along the table here, would you give to viewers who are not intending at the moment to sign up to the declaration? Why should they bother? Starting with you, Amanda, as your nearest.
Okay, because I think you're going to get left behind if you don't. I genuinely believe that this is something that is serious, is committed to by a lot of very big organisations, and we absolutely must do it. So you're going to just get left behind, and it will be to the disadvantage of your customer and, more importantly, your staff.
I would endorse what was said, and really just say we've got to do this as a profession, as a sector, and we must move it forward.
You'll be left behind, you'll lose customers, you'll lose staff, and you'll lose profits.
Yeah.
It's your choice.
Thank you very much. And with that, thank you very much to our panel. That's all we have time for today. Thank all of you who watched and all of those who sent through questions. Those we didn't ask today, I'll make sure we'll go to the panel. I'm sure they'll look at those and we'll maybe get back to you on a personal level. I hope you found this a very enlightening debate. I certainly have. And would encourage you to download the declaration if you haven't read it and have a look and make up another decision. With that, it's goodbye from us, and I look forward to welcoming you to our studio again soon. Thank you.